And welcome to On the Spot this week. And my name is Kevin Hill here with Tony Mulvey. We're going to talk about the spot market and what is happening. We got a good dose of it right there, right before this from Zach Strickland and Anthony Smith.
Yeah, we did. I mean, I think Zach gives pretty good insights there about how the rising fuel costs are playing an impact in the spot market. I mean, you look at how spot rates are, how they're reported, they include those fuel surcharges that are a little more adaptive to changes in fuel prices.
They are, and you recently, I think it was yesterday, you downloaded the latest IEA report and saw their forecast for the next few months. It's tough to forecast anything, especially in oil and gas right now, but what did they have to say?
Yeah, I mean, their forecast that came out yesterday had WTI prices at like $103 a barrel, and by the contract yesterday at the end was like $124 a barrel. So it was like it came out and it was already kind of out of date. So I mean, I think that's kind of the theme right now is everything's changing so fast that it's hard to forecast anything.
It is hard to forecast WTI or anything oil, gas, diesel prices right now, and we have changing situations seemingly minute by minute. So it's very tough to do when it comes to spot rates. Talk about company performances. Let's talk about a little bit of Landstar to start off. Yeah,
so Landstar filed that 8K, I guess, a couple weeks ago, right? Talking about how they had Ukrainian operations looking about shut down there in that last week of the quarter, obviously. All the geopolitical stuff happening there, but they mentioned that it could cost them up to $100 million in revenue in the first quarter, which, I mean...
Yeah, one of their big brokerage operations is based in Ukraine. I think in their 10K or annual filings, it was $740 million, some roughly around that. Just that one agency is something that FreightWaves reported. Mark Solomon did before they filed the 8K. We kind of broke the story on that. So you have that part that those operations can be moved over. That's what we hear from some analysts who aren't too concerned with that exposure. But that's a lot of, I don't care how big you are, $750 million, moving that back onshore, working that book of business or that agency business there, or maybe in the Western Ukraine. I think some offices have moved. Been talking to Freight Caviar recently. He'll be speaking at the 3PL Summit about kind of the experiences of his friends and colleagues in the Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think, the other factor is here domestically. I think in that 8K, they released that revenue per load was up 27% through the first 8 weeks, and number of loads were up 24%. So, when you factor in that volume's grown 24% and revenue per load has grown 27%, that's like a 51% increase, right?
It is. Your revenue per load and your loads are increasing. That tells you it's a very healthy freight market. You're grabbing what you need out there as far as market share or anything like that.
Yeah, when you look at it and break it down that way, that growth, right, based on their guidance does give them a runway on the top end of their guidance, right? I think it comes down to, even with a $100 million hit, just keeping everything else equal, it would exceed it by like 6%, the top end guidance. So that's a pretty substantial growth.
It is substantial growth, and you see that throughout the 3PL industry is, spot rates are still up and load activity is still up. So both sides of the equation are going up. It means that there's some, every 3PL that I talk to, there's outstanding growth year over year, and it goes with more volumes, with more revenue per truck, more gross margin per truckload as well.
Yeah. And guess what? It's not just brokers. Look at LTL companies. They've come out with so we've heard from Saia, ODFL, and ArcBest, right? And they've all put out those first quarter updates, and you look at revenue, ArcBest was up like 25% year over year in February. ODFL was up 38% in February in that LTL revenue, and I actually have a chart that shows our contract rates, right? And you look back at February, and they were up about 25%. Granted, that gap's narrowed.
Yeah.
We saw that uptick last year in LTL pricing right around this time. So, I mean, there are a little more difficult comps here in, say, March. So in the end of the third quarter, but I mean, they're still exceeding what we're seeing in contract rates, which, I mean, ODFL doing that as the gold standard of LTL, not really a surprise, but I mean, it is when you look at it and then you see volumes growing as well. Definitely interesting time.
It shows you the American consumer is still buying online, and they're still buying not only online, but they're buying everything.
Yeah.
Buying a lot of tangible things. We'll see. You know, it seems like the pandemic has kind of fallen away pretty well. Opening back up, people will be traveling more services, and we will see what the impacts of inflation. Plus the new inflation driver that we have right now, which are oil and gas prices that are spiraling right now. We'll see how that heads into the back half of the year and how that affects spending and consumer behavior.
Yeah, and I know later this week we'll get Bank of America's updated credit card spending. We'll get the CPI reading. So we'll kind of see how more real time how that inflationary pressures are affecting consumer spending, right? So, I mean, it's definitely one thing I'm paying attention to this week in particular. I mean, you look at consensus estimates of the CPI. I mean, it's like, I think last I saw it, 7.9%. I mean, that's just, I mean, it's 8% inflation rate, right?
Is 8% something we haven't seen since the late 70s or early 80s, or the country hasn't seen since then? And you know, as long as the consumer is strong, as long as we have risks still popping up, you know, we have geopolitical risk, we have military risk now, not so much pandemic, but those risks are still out there, and as long as people keep buying, we're still going to have inflation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things you look at. I mean, it went from pandemic to geopolitical risk, but like there was no in between, right? So there was no buffer for the consumer or these the shippers to act any different, to get any relief, right? They're still facing risk. I mean, you look at operations getting shut down in Russia. Granted, a lot of stuff doesn't come from there, but I mean, it impacts ocean capacity.
It impacts Asia.
Yeah,
it really does. It impacts Asia and kind of what risks might be there. We'll be talking about more spot market, you know, FreightWaves market volumes, what the market's doing next Wednesday, or this coming Wednesday, or a week from today, because today is Wednesday. So we'll be talking about that at the 3PL Summit, our next virtual conference. Some great speakers. Ann Ranke will lead us off with the keynote, President and CEO of the TIA Association. But with that, we'll throw it to a quick break and come back. I see Mr. Supply Chain himself is waiting to come on camera. We can't steal his screen time though. So stay tuned and we'll be right back.